In 1937, Hiroshi Saito, former Japanese ambassador to the United States, speaking of his country's aims in China, said,
Japan is not bent upon conquest and has no desire to detach or annex any part of China. What our government and people want is peace and security in the Far East. We seek the cooperation of the Chinese, not their territory.
This is how Japan's armies interpreted her ambassador's words. On December 7th, 1941, while another Japanese ambassador talked in Washington, Nipponese airmen made ready for their coming attack. At the very moment that smiling Ambassador Nomura and Special Envoy Kurusu expressed their hopes for peace, Japanese planes were on their way to Pearl Harbor with a very different message. The United States battleship Arizona, struck by Japanese bombs, became a roaring furnace. In approved Axis style, Japan unleashed a blitzkrieg, and war encircled the globe. There should have been neither consternation nor surprise when Japan attacked in the Pacific, for the world has seldom known a nation so consistently predatory. In 1895, Japan invaded and took over nearby Formosa. Then in 1905, she fought Russia, adding Kwantung and the southern half of Sakhalin to her empire. In 1910, Korea was annexed. In 1919, after the First World War, Japan acquired a mandate over Germany's Pacific Islands. Then in 1931, she invaded Chinese Manchuria, and it became Japanese Manchukuo. In 1937, the present unprovoked conflict in China began, and still continues after years of bitter warfare. But the Western world still refused to take warning. Even when Japan sent Matsuoka to see Hitler in 1941, they closed their eyes to the significance of a union between the world's most aggressive military powers. Japan laid plans for her war against the United Nations well before Pearl Harbor. By taking Indochina from France, she acquired a strategic base for future attacks. December 7th saw these careful preparations result in fast, coordinated action. Pearl Harbor was part of a huge area under simultaneous attack. Guam fell to Japan while her veteran armies were moving into Thailand. At almost the same time, the Philippines and Britain's garrison at Hong Kong became targets for Japanese assaults. British Malaya fell. Japan kept to her relentless schedule. She battered down all resistance and conquered the Netherlands Indies. Then she turned west in Burma and drove its defenders back to the borders of India and China. Thus, the strategy planned in Berlin becomes clear: world conquest, with the Axis armies driving toward a junction somewhere in Asia. To defeat this enemy, we must know her. We must know her strengths and her weaknesses. Japan proper consists of 4,000 small islands, crowded with a population of 73 million. 80% of her land is mountainous, and all food must be grown on the remaining 20%. Fortunately for Japan, a mild climate permits 2 crops a year, but her farms average only 2.5 acres. So farmers are poor, and modern equipment cannot be used to advantage. Hence, the peasants still use the primitive tools of hundreds of years ago. Japan has always had a basic food problem. Most Japanese farmers are tenants, paying exorbitant rents to a small landowning class. Their standard of living is one of the lowest in the world. They live mainly on rice and fish. Japan's fishing fleets crowd her ports and range almost the entire Pacific to feed the island empire. Tokyo, a city of over 7 million, and other large urban centers have absorbed millions of Japanese farmers unable to make a living on the land. Even the low pay of the city's industrial plants seems luxurious compared to the poverty of the farms. The major portion of Japan's industry is carried on in homes and small factories. This is true even of her large and rich silk industry, which before 1939 produced 75% of the world's supply. 4/5 of Japan's silk output was sold to the United States. Loss of this market has caused a severe economic dislocation. Japanese heavy industry has been built up at the expense of the living standards of the people. The monthly wage for men averages $19, for women only $7. This industry has always had one especially important weakness: almost complete lack of needed raw materials. As Japan girded for war, this need grew more acute. Therefore, Japan stored huge reserves of oil. She hoarded scrap iron. Millions of tons of these and other essential raw materials were bought abroad and piled up in anticipation of the day when she could import them no more. Japan's industries, increasingly occupied with building her powerful war machine, have for years been dominated by great family trusts like Mitsui and Mitsubishi. These industrialists, together with the military leaders, rule this strange modern feudal state. The people have no voice in the government. A few high-ranking officers are the real rulers. Backed by a fanatical army and navy, they have completely oppressed the Japanese people. This military clique, using the emperor as a front, administers the country with an iron hand. A regimented people is taught that Japan's is a just and holy cause, but her real philosophy is force. The emperor's troops, landing on foreign shores, believe that theirs is a divine mission. For Japan's rulers have popularized the idea that she is destined to dominate the Pacific and ultimately rule the world. Already, her invasion of Southeast Asia has given her complete mastery over 97% of the world's rubber-growing areas. Control of this vital material is a powerful weapon against the United Nations, who need rubber in vast amounts to carry on the war. Oil fields in Burma and the Netherlands Indies provide Japan with fuel for a long war. The vast tin resources of British Malaya and the Dutch East Indies are also at her disposal. The same is true of a long list of other strategic materials, if Japan's enemies allow her the breathing space to develop these resources. Japan's early conquests were made easy for her by an accident of geography. The nations she invaded first were close at hand. The problem of supply was simple for a great maritime power. But today her lines of communication are becoming dangerously extended. Every extra mile from home is a peril to Japan. Manila is 1,800 miles distant. New Guinea is 2,500. Timor is 3,000. And Singapore is just as far. It is 4,000 miles to Rangoon. All these distances must be translated into long lines of ships, extremely vulnerable to attack both by air and sea. Every Japanese ship that goes down is a serious loss. For Japan lacks the shipbuilding capacity to make good her losses quickly. Her industry cannot continue in operation if the supply lines to newly conquered sources are cut. Japan needs enormous quantities of steel for this war, but produces less than 7 million tons a year. Steel output in the United States alone is close to 90 million. The low productivity of Japanese labor is another crucial weakness. A 50% increase in employment has netted only a 20% gain in output. Japan has made vast conquests of territories and peoples. She now controls an area 2.5 times the size of the United States and 200 million people. But these new slaves of Nippon will scarcely help Japan in her race against the clock, for the age of imperialism is ended. The people of Asia share the worldwide urge for a future that will be better than the past. They await the day of their liberation. To defeat Japan, we must enlist their aid by proclaiming the 4 freedoms in Asia. On the production line, the United Nations are forging the weapons that will defeat our enemies. Already, our production of tanks exceeds that of the Axis powers. We have steel to make shells indefinitely. Japan has not. Just one of our plane factories will produce more bombers than the total known Japanese output of these heavy weapons. We must smother the Japanese Air Force, which is good but small, and we have the means to do it. We are building ships faster than they were ever built before. These ships will form great armadas, millions and millions of tons in carrying capacity to take our new armies into battle. Allies like the brave and battle-wise Filipinos are joined with us in this fight, as well as the hardened veterans of China who have held Japan since 1937. The Malayan peoples will join the fight for freedom, and the Dutch and Australians are fighting at our side. India's fighting men are preparing for action. In the West, Hitler is battled by the British and the hard-fighting Russians. Hitler's defeat would hasten Japan's doom. At the council tables of the United Nations, we shall make plans, first for victory, then for a free post-war world. But now we must speak the only language Japan understands. The might of the United Nations will hearten our friends and will destroy our foes. We have the weapons and know where to use them to destroy Japan's new order of slavery and to bring freedom to Asia's millions.